Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time. And I am Lucio Daza, the VP of Product Marketing here at Katalon. Today, I will be your host. And today, with us, we have Guillaume, from the co-founder at OctoPerf. Hello, Guillaume. Good morning or good afternoon.
Hello, Lucio. Glad to be here.
Excellent. We're very happy to have you. We also have Jeff, the VP of Sales of OctoPerf Americas. Hey, Jeff, welcome.
Hey, Lucio. Great to be here as well.
Happy to have you. And last but not least, we have the one and only Lakshmi from a Senior Solutions Engineer at Katalon. Hey, Lakshmi, how are you?
Hey, Lucio, I'm doing well. Hope everyone is doing well. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Happy to have you here. Again, I want to welcome the rest of our audience from anywhere they're joining. I see that there is activity already in the chat. We're going to address that in a couple of minutes, but if we can go to the next slide. Before we get started, a couple of things that I want to run by the audience. As always, if you have been in previous Katalon webinars, this is going to be recorded and available for you on demand on katalon.com/webinars, and I'm sure it's going to be available on the OctoPerf site as well. Also, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A session button in the Zoom interface that you're using right now. And also, we will have a Q&A session at the end. But please don't wait until then to ask any questions that you may have. Go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And I want to invite and I encourage everyone to continue also having and engaging on the conversation using the webinar chat window that we have available for you. With that said, today we're going to talk about a quick introduction about Katalon and then also a brief introduction of what is OctoPerf. And in addition to that, Lakshmi and Guillaume and Jeff are going to walk us through what is performance testing and how is it that this integration between Katalon and OctoPerf can help you. And as I mentioned, at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So let's go ahead and get started without further ado. So I am going to give you a quick intro of Katalon. This is, as I mentioned, this is going to be brief. We want you guys to get to the beef of what we're showing today. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to give a quick reminder to all of you of what Katalon is, which is an AI native modern and comprehensive quality platform that is going to allow you deliver the highest quality digital experiences for your customers. It's going to allow you to provide that quality that everyone is expecting, so the reputation of your product is the best. Remember, a happy customer is a customer that is going to come back, and you want to guarantee that the quality of their experience. So the platform, the Katalon platform, in the next slide, I'm going to show you how is it that we allow you to cover everything. When we say comprehensive, is because we allow you to cover everything from planning, authoring, organizing, executing, and analyzing test activities in your pipeline. So you may be wondering, hey, we're able to do this with other tools. Well, you can absolutely. Otherwise, you wouldn't be covering actually your entire testing lifecycle. But if once you start doing research with Katalon, you will learn that you will be able to leverage things like smart and centralized end-to-end orchestration with test ops. You can do authoring in a low code and also with assisted AI in Katalon Studio. You can do your integrations with your CI/CD pipeline using desktops as well. And last but not least, you can use Test Cloud and the Katalon runtime engine, or for those of you who are familiar with Katalon, KRE, which will allow you to enhance the flexibility and scale your test execution. And last but not least, you can go ahead and take a look at all these results with AI-powered analytics in desktops. So that is a quick, brief intro about Katalon. If you want to learn more, obviously go to katalon.com and also go to our community. You will find a lot of information in there. All right, with that said, and without further ado, I'm going to pass the time to Jeff and the rest of our panel today. So the mic is yours. Have fun and good luck.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucio. I appreciate it. And like Lucio said, just want to give you guys a quick background on OctoPerf as a company. So OctoPerf started about 7 years ago. It was started in France. And back then it was a group of expert performance testers that had been in the industry for a very long time. And they had a goal back then, which is still the same goal today, to create a comprehensive performance testing platform that is extremely easy to use, extremely value for money, and very feature-rich type of platform. In the last few years, we've been expanding into the US markets. So not only do we have offices in France, we have offices here in the USA now. And since its inception, OctoPerf has grown to about 600 customers worldwide. You can go to the next slide. So some of the key features that you'll find in OctoPerf and why these 600 plus customers are utilizing the platform today. It has very flexible deployment options available to you. You can utilize the SaaS platform and cloud infrastructure to scale your tests to, a couple 100,000 concurrent users, if not more. If you want to have, if you have more data sensitive types of tests going on, you can actually install OctoPerf fully on premise and behind your own firewalls. It is 100% compatible with JMeter. So if you're very familiar with the JMeter tool itself, you can easily just upload a JMeter script, click a few buttons and get your test underway. If you don't like JMeter or you don't want to use it anymore, you're not familiar, you can utilize OctoPerf's really user-friendly UI script creator. It's very, very easy to use. And then as you're running your tests in OctoPerf, you get these live and dynamic reports coming back to you that are essential to see what's going on in your performance tests and in real time. After the tests are done, you get results that you can compare, you can share, you can pass it off to whoever you need. And we also integrate with all the main CI tools out there to help you start automating your tests, as well as APM vendors, so you can monitor server-side metrics while your performance tests are going on. And last but not least, we pride ourselves in our support team here. We have it available all hours of the day, and you can easily just go and click a button on the website or in the app and start speaking to one of our support teams. So we're here to help. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Guillaume, and he will tell you a little bit more about performance testing.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, indeed. I'm going to do a short introduction on performance testing before we have a look at OctoPerf itself. So just a few words about performance testing. If you've never been doing it, or if you have never been in contact with it, the idea is usually to achieve one of the following objectives: either preserve brand image, secure investment, could be improve conversion rate on a website, optimizing the cost, or improving search engine optimization. So the idea is to conduct tests with a large number of users on the website in order to secure one of these requirements. It can cover many different aspects, such as load time on a website, could be page rendering, server responsiveness. So, depending on the one of the objective you want to achieve, you can look at it in different ways. And I'll try to show you how OctoPerf answers to these requirements. So let's have a quick look at it. I will try to conduct a full-fledged test campaign, but obviously I'll have to keep it short. So first of all, I'll log in OctoPerf, and I want to create a new project so that we start over from the beginning. Well, I'll just call it demo, and we can open it straight away. The first step is to create a virtual user, which is basically a script we are going to replay against an application. We have a couple of options to get started. We can start from JMeter. We mentioned it earlier, but OctoPerf uses JMeter at the core to run the tests. We don't really have to, though, because we could start with a recording we do. HAR recording can be done in many different sources, like you can use any browser to do that. So what I will do in the interest of time here is use a recording I've already done from my Firefox, but we have a lot of tutorials showing how to do it. If you're not aware, you simply need to use the standard Firefox and the DevTools. So when you have done that, it will generate a file like this with all the traffic you went through in your browser, and opening it in OctoPerf will create a virtual user for us. So there I have it. Now if I open this user, I can see the traffic. It's being grouped in different what we call containers, basically groups of requests or pages, if you will. And these can be renamed to however you want. So you see the idea is already to make it comprehensible at this step. I'm giving name to these containers so that we understand which step of the application we are going through. We can also see all the requests involved. On this application, I know I have logged in using a particular login. So what can be interesting is to search for it. I know I've been using this as a login and password, as a login and in the application. If I open it, OctoPerf can show me the request here that's related to that, and this request is a post request to my application. And I can configure the payload of this request. As you can see here, we have the login, we have the password, and a few other things. So what's interesting is to, instead of using a single login and password for the entire test, remember we're going to run hundreds, maybe thousands of these. What's interesting is to use a list of login and passwords. So we could create a CSV variable to that end. Let's do that right away. I have a CSV file with a few logins to use. So I'm going to pick that one. The usage for this file is a bit weird because user1 is not a is actually a value. So the problem is this file doesn't have a header. I have to enter one manually. So let's do that, login and password. Now we see how we are supposed to use it in our script from earlier. What I can do is save this variable and go back to the virtual user or the script from earlier. We were on the body of this post request, and now we have a few options. Typically, we can use dollar brackets to show the available variables, but we also have this autocomplete panel that I can use right there, where we have our variables, but also we have all the functions available to us. Like if we need to generate a current date or a lot of other things, it's all documented in here. Anyway, in my case, it's okay with this login and password. It's enough for the demonstration. What I'll do is just run this user a couple of times before we go to the real test. The goal at this point is to validate that it works. We will see how it goes. First of all, the validation is starting. Since I'm using the SaaS platform, it will be starting using an AWS agent that is already up and running. We'll get the result in a minute in the form of colored dots in the tree right there. So this will allow us to analyze what's going on. I've run it 3 times, if you remember, because, well, a single run wouldn't be enough to compare. So here, if we check it out, we see this one, first of all, this one failed all the time. We have 0 out of 3. If we check it out, it's actually an image that's not there anymore on the website. So what I can do is disable this action. I mean, okay, now that I know this image is not there, it's not really interesting to keep hitting it. But this one here is a bit more interesting. We can look at this. We can check the request that was sent. We see the cookies were handled automatically by OctoPerf. We can see the body of the request. It's actually the same in both situations, but if we switch to number 2, we see number 2 is been using a different login in the list. You see, using user 2 instead of user 1. If we check the response headers, they match, so it seems to be okay. But we have one that fails, and it's the third one actually. If we check it out, we can see the response code is different. We can also see there's a different response body. And what we can do is open it in a new tab in order to understand what's going on. And well, I have some invalid login and password in my dataset file. So because of that, the login fails sometime. So it's interesting to understand that. And for instance, we could add a custom control on this response to say, okay, I don't want to have this value in the response. Let's give it a name. Call it login OK. And in terms of behavior here, I want the behavior to be to fail when this value is present. So we do not want to have it in the response. Now there's a lot more we could be doing because we have loops, we have conditions we can use. We also have scripts if we need to code something more complex. It is possible as well. But we've already worked on this one quite a bit. So what I propose is we execute this user. But before we do that, I'm just going back to the design, first of all, to rename it. Let's use a shorter name, which will display better, but also to show you you can download it. And the download is in JMX format, so the JMeter format. It's an important statement for us at OctoPerf to show that everything you've done can also be reverted back to open source. Because this way it pushes us to have a tool that is interesting to use. Otherwise, people would be going away. And also, do not have to be afraid about migrating if you want to switch. Anyway, in the meantime, I moved on to the runtime. On this screen, I want to create a scenario, a test scenario. This default test scenario here goes from 0 concurrent users to 10. We can configure it. Let me reduce this panel a bit. So we have only the buyer, but we could have different other scripts. One that is only browsing, one that is creating an account, etc. We can pick the location, although for this one, I'll stick to Paris. We can configure another one after. What's interesting would be also to change the load policy. You see, we could go up and down. We could do pretty much anything we want. What I'll do is use a transform button at the bottom to pick one of the presets. I like to use this preset. It usually does the job. I'll just go up to 50. It's a bit more interesting. But yeah, there we go. We have up to 50 users, and then we ramp down after a while. Can save it this way. What I'll just do is duplicate this profile, and on the duplicate, instead of running it from Paris, I will run it from further away. Or let's run this one from the US. So I expect to have, with two very different regions like this, I expect to be able to see a large difference in response time because my application is hosted in one place and it's close to Paris. So let's launch a test this way. And I'll go straight away to the test. The test starting wizard is not that interesting. So in a few minutes, we'll get to the live report. For now, we are starting the machines required for this test. Since it's a small one, we'll get started right away. So, that's we'll be able to quickly see the report this way. And there we are, the report. So there's two things to know about the test report in OctoPerf. The first one is it's a live report. For now, as we can see, we don't have any metrics. We're just getting started, so it makes sense, but we'll get there. And the second one is it's configurable. Just because we see something here doesn't mean we can't edit it. So everywhere we go, we can edit the metrics. What's interesting is to do it on a graph like this one. We have the number of users running. We have the hit rate, so the number of requests, or in this case, number of transactions per second. We also have a response time. So if I were to click here, you see I'm editing the graph now. And on this screen, I can select like a filter on Paris for this one. And now I can duplicate it and use a filter on North California. So now we have both on the graph. I can close this tab to go back to my report. And we see, yes, that we have the two of them. And well, since the pet store is hosted next to Paris, it makes sense that it's faster from there. But while the test is going, we can compare both of them. We could add other metrics, obviously. There's also a lot of other graphs we can use, like this one where we see the tree view of our user. We can see that we have a lot of statistics for every level of the, for instance, for the transaction, but also the requests inside them. In this case, we can see the error rate is propagated from this request, account.action. So an interesting move would be to go to the end of the report, check the error table to understand why we have errors on this one. And well, you probably noticed or you probably remembered by now, but well, yes, we've put an assertion to control if the login is okay, but we haven't really fixed our login problem. So that's what's still going on. But this way I can show you what we do when there's an error, because we actually store the request and response. So this way we can analyze what's going on. We can see the content of this response. There's the error message we could see earlier. So, this way we can analyze what's going on when there is an error. There are a lot of other things on this report. I mean, we won't have time to detail them all, but response codes over time is a good way to figure out if the test is still okay. Like if you get a huge spike of errors at some point, it can tell you to go look at your monitoring to see what's going on. We also have the response times here, the worst transaction response times. And
Hey,
a lot of...
William, sorry
Yes,
to interrupt you. So can you
sure.
go a little bit slower if possible? As in
Sure,
like
yeah.
going a little bit more deeper? I mean, that's the ask from a couple of our participants.
Okay, sure. Well, I was almost done anyway. So in that case, what you can do, I was going to hand it over to you, Lakshmi. Actually, what we can do is if there's parts where I went too fast, I'm happy to elaborate at the end. So keep it going with the questions. But apologies
That
for going too fast.
no worries. That'll be great.
Yeah. There's a few last things I have to say before I hand it over to Lakshmi. First of all, well, we can generate a PDF out of this when it's finished. Just need to click on export here. We can also compare different test reports. So we'll just go ahead and show you that. It takes a minute, but I need to do it on another project where I have a few test reports like this, where we can create a comparison report. And when we do that, we can pick up to 4 performance test reports and generate a comparison one. It's actually the same kind of report on what we already seen earlier. The main element that will stand out is the comparison. For instance, the comparison table here where we can see the differences from test to test. And just to finish, we have here in OctoPerf, all the time you use OctoPerf, you can use the live chat to ask any technical question. So, it's a very good way to get some technical help if you're lost or if you need guidance with the tool. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lakshmi. We'll talk about the integration with OctoPerf, between Katalon and OctoPerf.
Thanks, William. So let's actually quickly go through what and how Katalon Studio can work hand in hand with OctoPerf. So I'll probably take the next 10 to 15 minutes to go through this integration and leave it back to William again, so he can go through some parts or some critical parts which the audience would like to see over again. So a quick background about how I transitioned from a performance engineer into a functional automation test architect. So I started my career back in performance engineering, and that's why I was very much interested in giving this webinar, because it basically integrates two different aspects of my life, where performance engineering and functional testing with Katalon. So let's quickly go deeper to understand what is required from Katalon's perspective in order to make it work efficiently and effectively along with the OctoPerf. So there are a couple of IDs, or like couple of important parts for us to even consume the APIs out of OctoPerf. And the first one being template ID. So Guim actually presented what exactly is the template ID. It refers to the unique identifiers for a unique set of configuration. This might be your load test, it might be your endurance test, the longer duration test, or even a spike test where you're trying to ramp up your users at a faster pace. So once you create that specific template, you'd be able to get that template ID and scenario IDs, again, a specific to a test scenario which is associated to OctoPerf. The third part here is the workspace ID, which is going to give you control over you accessing a unique workspace on your OctoPerf environment via Katalon Studio, and the project ID is where your project is associated to, and you're able to obtain that ID as well. Finally, for any API or for us to consume or for us to interact with an application, in this case, for us to have an integration with OctoPerf, API key is extremely critical. So there is a unique API key which could be obtained for your instance, for your user, which could be leveraged by Katalon Studio for it to run a test effectively and efficiently. The most important part outside of all these IDs and all the API key is to have download a report.sh, which is a shell script, which basically helps you to download the report out of your OctoPerf and bring it back into Katalon Studio. So when we talk about integration, let me actually paint you a simple picture on what this integration does. So often in a bi-weekly sprint or even a weekly sprint, off late, you see with a lot of AI, people want to go to market fast, want to deploy it fast. So people have very less time to spend time on testing. And unfortunately, performance testers are the ones who are going to be engaging in a project towards the end of the sprint. So what this integration does is it's going to be able to interact with Katalon Studio, which your automation testers are already going to be using. And if they have your dedicated test instances or test IDs, or in this case, test scenarios which are created within OctoPerf, you'd be able to directly kick off your test, obtain your results out into Katalon Studio. So basically one less interface for an automation tester to deal with, so that the performance engineers, who are mostly shared resources across multiple projects, have enough time to focus on other key areas or other unique areas where they want to execute their tests. Let's quickly go through how this works from a Katalon Studio perspective. So this is Katalon Studio, I'm pretty sure folks on the call would have used this tool. If not, I'll quickly go through what exactly is Katalon Studio. So Katalon Studio is built on top of Eclipse. For the coders here or for people who are proficient with coding, you would have definitely encountered or seen this window. So this is where Katalon Studio is built on top of Eclipse, and Katalon Studio uses Selenium as its backend. So one good thing which OctoPerf does outside of the performance engineering space is expose its APIs where other tools can consume it. So from Katalon Studio's perspective, we are able to consume those APIs for us to run these tests in an effective and in an efficient way. So let's quickly go into one of the profiles where I pre-configured all the required IDs as we discussed in the previous slide. So I've got my a bench report ID, template ID, project ID, scenario ID, and the API key. So bench report ID is something which we don't obtain directly, but it's a byproduct, or it's once you start a test, you'd be able to obtain that specific ID out of your execution. Let's quickly see a test case where we are able to kick off a test from Katalon Studio onto OctoPerf. So I've actually created multiple test cases here. The first test case where I'll be calling is going to be executing a scenario with an ID. The second one is going to be checking if my run is executing properly, or if there are any failures, or if the run is not, if it's terminating at any point. And finally, the most important part of any testing, irrespective of it being a non-functional testing or a functional testing, is to obtain extensive reporting capabilities. So let's quickly go through what these test cases are, and I will kick off a test and show you a sample report. And finally, I'll hand it over back to William. So here, once you open this test case, you can see that I am posting my scenario ID as one of my API calls. As you go deeper into it, you can see that this specific API call has got basically an endpoint where I'm pointing it towards the default profile, global scenario, a global variable, which is the scenario ID. And then I'm also providing it with your template ID as we have configured it earlier. So the query parameter, which is the template ID, is going to help you uniquely identify the scenario for us to kick off that in along with the scenario ID. Once you have that, you'll be able to pass your bearer token, which is the API key. And if I execute this specific test, you'll be able to see that a scenario in OctoPerf is getting kicked. But before I get started with executing this specific scenario, let's go back into our main test case to see what are the other options or what are the other APIs with which we interact with. So the test case number 2 here is going to be tracking run progress, which is a very straightforward test. Here we are actually going to be looking into a simple web service request, which is going to check or get the bench result, which I mentioned earlier. And this is a unique or more of a dynamic ID for every iteration. And you'd be storing that response and using that variable in a subsequent ID for you to get your test result out of it. Finally, the most important case, as I mentioned, is to download a PDF report. And for downloading a PDF report, here is where you have 3 separate commands, and you'd be able to get and use the download report.sh. As I've mentioned in my presentation earlier, this download report.sh has to be placed within your root folder within your Katalon Studio project. So it is able to execute a shell script for you to obtain the report ID post execution with the help of the bench report ID and the API key. Let's quickly run this once to see what exactly is happening on the API front. I'm going to run it as a web service because it's got web service requests. So I've already kicked it off here. It's a 10-minute long test, a simple sample scenario, which is running it against our very own healthcare application. Let's go deeper to go into what exactly is happening on this front. So as I kickstarted, you can see that this specific test ID is now getting started here, and it's already in progress. It's in the initializing phase, and it's going to take the next 10 minutes for you to run the test. So what we did was, without encountering or without going into OctoPerf, we are able to control the scenarios or run the scenarios from your Katalon Studio and also obtain your test results out of it. So that is how it works. So once your test execution is completed, you would be automatically getting a test report downloaded so into the same project root folder. But for time being, I've already downloaded a report or a sample report which I executed some time back, and you would be able to see what these test results looks like. And if needed, I mean, the whole purpose of downloading the PDF or the report PDF is to ensure that the automation tester can also get a visibility into what's happening from a performance of an application without going into the OctoPerf itself. So you'd be able to kick things off in Katalon Studio, basically, which will execute your tests and get the results or the reports back into the Katalon Studio. So this is the whole life cycle of how Katalon Studio integrates and works with OctoPerf. So I will leave it over to William now to go a little bit deeper into certain areas which the audience would like to see, and we can take it forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. I'll be sharing the screen again, so let me know if you have anything you'd like to see or any question about what everyone has shown so far.
Also, while you get prepped there, Guillaume, one of the questions that is coming through the chat, which is not going to make it to the Q&A panel, is if you guys can share some information about the APIs. And I believe this is Carlos asking to, I think he may be asking for API documentation on behalf of OctoPerf. I'll go ahead and share also the API info for Katalon, but if you can put that in the chat, that would be super helpful.
Definitely. We have a page here with a link to our Swagger. So I'll just put it in the chat. And on this page, there's an example that allows you to run a test, same way Lakshmi did, but simply through our REST API.
Great, thank you.
I think, sorry, I need to send it to everyone. There we go. Should be okay now. And the Swagger contains all the methods and everything.
So one key area which you could focus on, William, when we actually started with this execution, right? Can you actually go a little bit deeper into different scenarios which you create, probably for the next 10 minutes or so before we take up questions, and like walk them through on how each scenario would work, like if possible?
So in terms of runtime, you have many possibilities in terms of scenario you can execute here. We can figure one with two groups like this, but as we've seen earlier, it's possible to create different kinds of policies. Like if you want to do a simple load test, there's a very short ramp up, or if you want to do different steps, depending if you want to test different load levels on your application. So once you have configured this, most of the information you will require from Katalon will be available in the URL right there. So the IDs and a lot of the things Lakshmi mentioned are available right there, typically.
Awesome. So from the chat, do you guys have anything specific to see from an OctoPerf perspective? I think it was from Raz and John. So do you have anything specific? Not got any chat yet. So let's actually go deeper into the questions, Lucio, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So we can go ahead and switch into the Q&A session now. There's a question from, I believe it's either John or Iziran Chaima in the Q&A, and John is saying, I would like to know if the data generated can be managed, since one of the major setbacks for performance testing tools is that the size of the data that is generated. It can cause performance issues in the environment. So is there anything around that either Lakshmi or Guillaume can elaborate more on how is it that the data is managed and generated?
Yeah, so it depends. So sort of different types of data that you could be talking about. Everything that's on the load generator side in OctoPerf is displayed in the report. So if there's anything wrong with the load generator, you can tell. because there's monitoring of the host and even the Java virtual machine inside it. So if you're afraid that the data generated will crash the machines generating the test, well, it's always possible in extreme cases, but if this happened, you would be aware of it. So, it's always possible to take action. But we take a lot of precautions to make sure that we do not store things that might eat up this space or things like this. In terms of data to run the test, the dataset, OctoPerf will take care of it, will split the dataset, send it to the load generator for you, so you don't have to worry about this. This is what I've done with CSV variable from earlier, by the way, and we could have many other files in the project that would be handled this way. And in terms of the data created on the application itself, this could happen if you're testing in production, I guess, because in production you might have data created that would be a problem. But most of the time it's also recommended to test before production for this reason, because it makes it much more manageable in terms of data that you have to create. Or what you can do is have a space in production dedicated to the test you'll be running where you can create and safely remove data after the test. It can be done with, because in OctoPerf you can run, you can run things before and after the test. Typically we have the setup and teardown here that can be run before and after. So you could have a teardown that will send a request to your environment to remove test data or to launch a process that will take care of this. So I hope it answers your question, or let me know, otherwise I'm happy to elaborate.
Sounds good. And then there is another question on the chat. Aravind is asking if Guillaume, let me know if this is something that can be addressed later, or it can be addressed now, but he's asking how to add web servers and app servers in the monitoring graphs.
Yep, so I don't have one I can demonstrate in the app, but I'll show you what it looks like from our documentation. We have monitoring, and you can create monitoring connection for a variety of technologies. So the idea is you use an OctoPerf agent to monitor your servers, and we'll gather that during the test inside the report. The exact same way I've shown you the monitoring for a load generator, we will use the same component to do monitoring for other components. It's integrated in all our licenses, so it's nothing to worry about. You can always use it. And it's not like an APM. So if you already have an APM solution to monitor your servers, you might want to reuse it and integrate with it. But it's a good way to monitor an environment where maybe you're not using the APM because it's too costly to monitor every environment, or for a variety of reasons. So OctoPerf already provide that, and then the prerequisites are dependent on the technology. But it's just a matter of creating a monitoring connection to the system you want to add to your report.
Sounds good. Thank you for sharing that info. Let's see. I'm looking at the Q&A. There is a couple of questions around like any best practices that you can share in terms of the integration that we just saw between Katalon and in how to migrate functional tests to OctoPerf. Then again, probably around what you were showing earlier, Guillaume or Lakshmi, to do that implementation. Any best practices that you can share, any documentation that we can share in terms of how to get it done?
Sure, maybe I can start. Lakshmi, you can complete if you have things to add. What I would recommend, a typical mistake when coming from functional testing in general is to want to test everything. So I'd recommend you start with a couple of use cases, try to test the most relevant ones, because converting them to load testing can take a bit of effort depending on what you want to convert. There are different ways to convert. At the moment, we don't have an integration to convert scripts from Katalon to OctoPerf yet. That is something that will be discussed in the future. But yeah, my main recommendation will be to start small with a few use cases and to grow on that as you launch your first performance test, because it's always better to run a few very simple performance tests than to run none of it.
100%. I agree with what William had mentioned. Again, based out of my experience, what usually happens is functional testing always has this goal of having 100% test coverage. Fortunately or unfortunately, performance testing doesn't work that way. From performance testing or performance engineering perspective, we would like to address what is extremely critical. And usually, when you do the log analysis or use tools like Adobe Analytics, where you can get complete details on what's going on in production, and you try to replicate what is extremely critical for that application in your lower environment into the performance engineering space.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, is this something that the audience can go ahead and try, or there is a pricing structure behind this integration?
So talking about OctoPerf, you can create a free account, which allows you to do pretty much everything I've done. The only limitation with a free account is 50 concurrent users, but there's no time limitation or anything. And it allows you to test the integration that Lakshmi demonstrated. So
Sounds good. Alrighty, and I believe Linda was asking for pricing information, so I went ahead and put in there in the chat the price page for Katalon and OctoPerf as well, so you can go and take a look at that. All right, so I don't see any more questions in the panel or in the chat. Is there anything before we go, Guillaume and or Lakshmi, that you would like to share with the audience before we conclude today's webinar?
My side, I think we've covered pretty much all of it. Maybe thank you everyone to have come to the webinar, and I hope you liked it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Lakshmi, any closing words from you?
It's a very interesting space to bring in functional and non-functional testing together, where we try to leverage each tools independently. And as we partner with OctoPerf moving forward, we try to make use of Katalon scripts as well, which is down the lane. And looking forward to the next webinar when that's ready.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for your participation. And also as a reminder, this will be available on demand on katalon.com/webinars. The link is on the chat. But as always, and as Lakshmi said, please keep an eye for other upcoming webinars and events that we have coming up. Once again, Guillaume, Jeff, Lakshmi, thank you so much for your participation and for all the knowledge that you shared today to our audience. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you, everyone.